So how do you choose what story you're going to tell, or what script you're going to write if you're going to write it? A lot of it has to do with your personal bias. A lot of people have this story that they just came to them or they discovered or found, and that's the story that they want to tell. That was the case with me. With my first film, which was called My Brother's Keeper, it was based on this story that my grandfather told all his grandchildren, all 5 of us. Since we were babies, he would tell us the story of these 2 brothers who help each other. And this became sort of the legacy story in our family. Then he used to pay us 25 cents to sit on his lap and tell it back to him. And I don't even know if the story was true or not, if it's based on a true story, but who cares? It was this great story with this really strong moral message, and we all loved it. That became my story. That's what I wanted to tell, make my first movie about. I wrote the first script. I ultimately had another scriptwriter rewrite it. The story basically came from that and then grew into something bigger. I added more characters, obviously, more plot lines, and made it into something bigger, but it was based on that. And by the way, at the end of the movie, I give my grandfather credit. I say inspired by the story by my grandfather. That's how my first story came to me. But, your stories come from all over the place, whether you see somebody, read an article, read a book, all this kind of stuff. You choose what your story is going to be about. However, I want to just give you one tip. For your first movie, if you want it to be successful, and I say financially successful, which you want it to be, because if you make a financially successful first movie, then that will set the stage for your career to make more movies. Even if your second one fails, and maybe even if your third, if the first one out of the gate works, or even breaks even, then that will literally propel you forward and give you a lot of ground to work with to move forward in your career. When you go to choose the story or the movie that you're going to make, I would suggest that you choose something that you think will be very viable with audiences. Even though it might not be the passion project that you want to do, think of the audience, all right, when you're choosing your first project. Think of, will this story resonate with audiences, and how will I market to them so that it's successful? What I'm saying is, don't make this just about you and your passion. Make it about the marketability to an audience. Choose that story first. And sometimes it's difficult to do that because you're so passionate about a certain story. And by the way, a lot of indie filmmakers have stories that are primarily based on their own lives, that they think are really dramatic. And, sometimes they are, but a lot of times they aren't. But because it's their lives and they see all the details and everything, they think the whole world's going to enjoy it. And I say, make that your second project or your third project. Choose something that is really commercially viable to an audience rather than what's really personal to you. If they happen to be one and the same, that's fantastic. Your passion project is very audience viable. But it's really good to start off with something that audiences will relate to. And you're not selling out. A lot of writers say to me, oh, you're selling out because you're doing something like what Hollywood does. You're just going for audiences. And I'm saying, you're building a career here. Your career is about entertaining audiences. That's what you're doing. You're making films to entertain audiences so that they'll pay for you to make another film. You're not really selling out. What you're doing is you're recognizing the needs of the audience, and you're providing content that's going to entertain them. And then ultimately, when the time comes, you will do your passion project that maybe isn't as commercially viable, and who cares? You just did it because you wanted to do it. But don't do it first, because if you do that first and it isn't commercially viable, you're not going to get a second chance. So now you've chosen the story. I have done several movies that are based on true stories that involve rights from people. So I'm going to tell the story of like an athlete. I needed to secure the rights, what we call the life rights or the story rights to that person in order to tell it. When you come across a project like that, basically you say, hey, wow, this is an inspirational story. This person did this, this, and this. I'd love to tell that story in a movie. And I think that audiences would really enjoy seeing it because it's so inspirational. And maybe that person actually already wrote a book or has a memoir or something like that. So you have to approach the person or the estate if the person isn't alive anymore. You have to say to them, hey, I want to make a movie about your life or about this component of your life, this achievement that you did. That's called securing story rights or securing life rights. And you're going to probably need a lawyer to do a life rights contract here or a story rights contract. And basically you're going to say, I'm going to have this story written. You're going to work with me and you're going to give, the writer all of the, maybe it's me writing it, all of the, details and components of what went on. And we're going to base this movie on your life. And hopefully that person is super cooperative and excited. You compensate them for a fair amount for what they're going to contribute. Then you move forward. That's one way to get a story. Perhaps you're going to license the rights to a book or option a book. Or, as I said, maybe you just created an original story. In any case, very important to make sure that you secure the rights. Because the worst thing you can do is make an entire movie, say, about somebody, and you didn't secure their story rights. And then all of a sudden, they sue you or they are disappointed with the story or whatever, and it causes it not to be releasable because a streaming platform doesn't want to get involved in some legal battle. And I suggest using, a lawyer who knows how to do this to make sure that you get that right. Because that's the foundation of everything that you're going to build from. And if you start with a shaky foundation, which meaning you don't have the actual rights, then you're going to get into trouble. Let's say it's an original story. And let's just talk a little bit about copyright. I get asked a lot of questions about copyright. Copyright is based on the expression of an idea, but not the idea itself. For instance, I'm going to use a classic storyline, Romeo and Juliet, obviously a classic Shakespeare play. The concept of Romeo and Juliet is guy meets girl, guy is from different side of the tracks than the girl, their lives collide, they can't come together because they come from different worlds. How do they overcome this and become, partners? That's the idea behind Romeo and Juliet. So that's a concept. Even though Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, he doesn't own the concept of a guy meeting a girl and a romance happening, when it shouldn't have. All right? And you can't copyright an idea or a concept. What you can copyright is then he wrote the play Romeo and Juliet, which embraced that concept. And he wrote it in such a way that he gave his characters voices and plot lines and everything like that. Now, guess what? That concept has been done hundreds of times. Where should I start? Grease, West Side Story, High School Musical. I mean, on and on and on. These are all the same Romeo and Juliet style stories that involve guy and girl who want to get together. I mean, Tony and Maria in West Side Story, are they any different than Romeo and Juliet? It's the exact same story, but it's expressed differently. It's done in New York and with different characters and different names and everything. Even though it's the exact same concept and story, the people who wrote West Side Story did not have to license the concept from Shakespeare for Romeo and Juliet because Shakespeare didn't own the concept. He only owned the expression of the concept, which was his play, and they own their movie. When you express your idea in the form of a script, that's usually what it is, then all of a sudden, that's your expression of the idea, and that's what's copyrightable. But the idea itself, like, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to make a horror movie about a witch that runs through housing development and kills 10 kids and one lives. That's not copyrightable, all right, because it's just an idea. When you write that story and express it and have characters and settings and voices and all this kind of stuff, then that's copyrightable. The minute you write something, it is deemed to be copywritten because you wrote it and you created it. So right away it's copyrighted. But there's this thing called registering copyright. So there's a lot of ways you can register your work. So one of the biggest ones in the United States is the Library of Congress or the Writers Guild. You can send your script in to the Library of Congress Copyright Office, and then they will put it on file and they will send you back a notice saying, okay, we have received it and now it's in our files. What you've done there is you haven't copywritten your work. You copywrote your work when you wrote it. All you've done is put it on file so that you're creating notice to the world that you wrote this work. So technically, how are other people going to know that you wrote it unless you give them notice? And that's what that is. That's basically notice of filing that you filed your work in this place so that it's available for other people to see what you wrote. But when you wrote it, it was actually copywritten. And you can put the little C and do that kind of stuff. What happens, which happens all the time, when two people in completely separate environments write the same work? Not exactly the same, all right, but so similar that you would think that one was copying the other. If person A, is in this place and writes the work at the exact same time, coincidentally, that person B is in this place, like in different countries, let's say, and writes a very similar work, and coincidentally, same names, same everything, it's very, very identical, then who owns the copyright? There's lots of arguments about that. That's what, lots of court cases about that kind of thing. Generally speaking, it depends on who wrote it first, and they can generally both have copyright on it because their work is probably just a tiny bit different, unless somebody can prove that somebody else copied the other person. If person A registers their work before person B, that gives them a little bit of an advantage to say, hey, they wrote first and they registered, and therefore maybe, person B copied them. But person A, if they want to have an infringement suit, would have to prove that person B actually copied them. This is becoming more and more complicated in today's world because of AI. All of these writing tools, basically you can say to, ChatGPT, hey, I want to write a script about this, this, and this based on this, this, and this, and it will generate something right away. Did you copy that? Did it write it exactly the same? Was it based on that? So these are issues that are going to turn the world upside down now, and already have started, and they're going to have to figure out resolutions. And when I say they, the courts, the industry, people in general, we're going to see what happens there, because this is a whole new dimension of copyright, potential infringement, creation. I mean, it's for everything. It's not just scripts. It's for music. It's for images. It's for photo. It's everything. Everything is about to change. So we'll see how that gets navigated in the future. But for now, choose the story that you think is going to work for you, protect it as best you can, and make a great movie.